I want to get Alex Kennedy's opinion on the ad sales as well on the jersey. But yesterday, the Heat of the first NBA team to win and lose a Game 7 by 20 or more points in a single postseason. They beat the Hornets by 33 in Game 7. They lost to the Raptors by 27. How different would these finals have been if these teams were healthy? We'll get Alex Kennedy from BasketballInsiders.com's opinion on all these basketball topics, including tomorrow night's NBA draft lottery, where the Sixers could have their name called not once but twice. We'll find out. How you doing, Alex?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good, man. I do want to get your opinion first because the Sixers made news today because of that ad sale. We knew it was coming. It seemed like, well, everybody says, well, it was inevitable. You knew it was coming. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I thought $5 million, which is Darren Ravel's report on how much it is, not enough skin in the game for me to do that. Does it bother you? Do you not care that the NBA decided to allow this to happen?
Well, I understand both sides of it. You know, I know some fans have gotten upset, and they said it does keep in the game and keep in things like that, and that they don't like it. As you mentioned, you know, other professional sports teams in North America haven't done that, so it is a first. But I think it was inevitable. Honestly, people from different leagues have been looking into this, and they're always open to finding a new revenue stream. You see that around professional sports. So the Sixers are the first, but I think a lot of NBA teams now are going to follow suit and do the exact same thing. And I think we're going to see a lot of other teams, too, in different sports, whether it's baseball, football. I think they're going to look into that. If they can bring in money, they'll always try to find a way to do that. And I think at the end of the day, it is so small. You know, I would be opposed if it was a big logo. We see in some of these leagues, they just have a huge, company advertisement across their chest. I think that looks really bad. But in this case, it's such a small thing. One thing people didn't even notice, if you look at All-Star Weekend, there were logos during the dunk contest and things like that on All-Star Saturday night, and a lot of people didn't even notice. Fans just said, I'm not going to watch it all, but it didn't stop people from watching the dunk contest. Certainly doesn't impact the game. I don't think it's that big of a deal just because it is so small, but I do understand fans that are kind of upset because it is a change.
I'll say this. I noticed yesterday in baseball, they weren't ads, but the little play ball things over top of some of the, and that was like, all right, that's their little way of saying, let's see what this looks like, because you never saw that play ball patch. And I remember a couple of years ago when they put, was it Spider-Man or Batman on some of the bases? People were like flipping out about that. So we'll see where this heads. The Sixers are the first to do it. And if the worst team in basketball can get it sold, I would assume that most teams around there think that if the guy selling that or the lady selling that can't get it done, I would think they get fired if the Sixers can get it done, and they can't. Alex Kennedy's with us here. All right, let's start with the East. Yesterday, we saw Toronto and Miami. Not a great aesthetically pleasing series there. How different would that series have been, in your opinion, had both teams been at optimum health there? We know that some of the Raptor guys banged up. Whiteside didn't play at all. What do you think about that, if that series would have been different at full health?
Well, I think, both centers are very important. Hassan Whiteside is the best shot blocker in the NBA if you look at the numbers, and he really improved as the season went on. When you talk about him learning team concepts and learning how to play under Eric Spoelstra, their net rating when he was on the floor was very good by the end of the season and much better than when he was off the floor. So I think defensively he would have had an impact. I don't think Bismack Biyombo necessarily dominates Miami and puts up, career-high numbers if Whiteside's in the game. Jonas Valanciunas obviously is very important too. He had been arguably the best player during the postseason. Just look at Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan have been very inconsistent. So both injuries hurt the teams, but I think if you want to talk about teams being completely healthy, if Chris Bosh is out there and Hassan Whiteside are out there, I think this series may go 5-6 games. I think that's just, how talented Bosh and Whiteside are. Bosh is by far the biggest injury to impact the series just because he's a superstar. He's someone that impacts both ends of the floor, puts up great numbers. His injury is obviously the most unfortunate, but, it led to some pretty ugly basketball. It's kind of tough to watch that series at times. But injuries are part of the game. So now Toronto advances to their first Eastern Conference Finals in franchise history. I don't think they have much of a shot against Cleveland. When you look at both teams, Cleveland's obviously at full strength right now. They're playing some of their best basketball, moving the ball, being unselfish, knocking down threes. I think it probably goes 5 games. Maybe Toronto will take one. But it's going to be pretty tough for Toronto moving forward.
Alex Kennedy, managing editor of Basketball Insiders at Alex Kennedy, NBA. The Raptors won 2 of 3 against Cleveland in the regular season. And, of course, Lowry and DeRozan played much better the last couple of games here. Obviously, they're going to need those two guys to play at such a high level. But You look at Cleveland here. Have they done anything differently? Are they more impressive than they were during the regular season? What has changed for Cleveland as we got to these playoffs that they really – is it they just haven't been challenged because their competition hasn't been very good, or have they done something to impress you, Alex?
I think it's a mix of both. You look at the fact they played Detroit, who had a lot of players that had never been in the postseason before. That's obviously a huge advantage for Cleveland. But then Atlanta, I think a lot of people thought the Hawks would at least be able to compete a little bit, not necessarily win the series, but compete better than they did. Yeah, you had Cleveland just dominate that series. I think a number of things they're doing differently are they're putting Kevin Love down low more, putting him at center, and I think Tyronn Lue has done a better job of utilizing Love than David Blatt did. That's been huge for this team, and it gives them some more versatility because they can move LeBron around. Love can stretch the floor and create space for those guys. I think J.R. Smith has really stepped up. He's playing very well this postseason. He's kind of one of those guys that's an X factor for your team because he can shoot you out of games and really struggle and be inconsistent. But when he gets hot, there are a few shooters and spot-up shooters that are better than him. He can create his own shot as well. So in that Atlanta series, when they broke the record for most threes in an NBA game, he was just on fire. And there were a number of games like that where, he had the green light, and rather than missing or settling for bad shots, he was just draining everything. So I think utilizing Love better has really helped them. I think that J.R. Smith has really stepped up. And I think, too, with their supporting cast playing better, that has really helped LeBron James not to do as much. Obviously last year in the playoffs, we saw LeBron had to carry this team, and then with each series and each game that passed, he was exhausted, and that's understandable with the amount of work they were having him do. Now, with everyone completely healthy and these other guys stepping up and scoring the ball and helping carry the offensive load and playing well on defense, LeBron hasn't had to do as much. And I think that's very good for this Cleveland team because it saves him for this series against Toronto. And then if they advance as expected, he should be fresh for the postseason or for the NBA Finals as well.
Yeah, that's a great point because last year people, it could be a rematch. We don't know. We'll get into that other series in just a minute, but they were clearly shorthanded last year, and I think there's a part of them that feels a little overlooked, that people, the story has been Golden State all year. Let's talk about them. They have swept the season series against Oklahoma City. This situation has happened 90 times where a team has been swept in the regular season and then faced that team in the conference finals. Teams that swept are 88-2 in that series. That doesn't sound like Oklahoma City has a lot of a chance here, a big chance to win this series. But did Oklahoma City do something to change when they got to the playoffs that make you feel better about them than maybe we would have if we said these teams were going to meet at an earlier stage?
Yeah, well, their biggest change they made was in the last round when they started playing Steve Adams and Cantor together. Those are two big men that can both score down low. Cantor has really stepped up. He was criticized last summer when he got a max deal. A lot of fans and media people felt like that was overpaying for him, but he's been great on offense as we expected. But then on defense, he has really done a good job. Last year, he was very effective, really all over the floor making plays. It's going to be interesting to see if they can keep that up, though, against the Warriors, because obviously Golden State is going to play small. Draymond Green, they throw him out there at center sometimes. They have that very small lineup where they put out Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala, Harrison Barnes, Draymond Green, and that's extremely hard to slow down. It's going to be really interesting to see if Golden State can force Oklahoma City to take their bigs off the floor, or if Adams and Cantor play extremely well, then that's where Golden State may have to make an adjustment and can't go with those, forwards down in the paint. So really, I'm curious to see which team can play their style and force the other to adjust. Because really, against the Spurs, Oklahoma City, those guys did a terrific job. Cantor and Adams were really key for them. And obviously, we know what Westbrook and Durant can do. I'm very curious to see the point guard matchup between Curry and Westbrook. And then I just don't know if I don't think any team can go small and compete with Golden State. You're not going to beat them at their own game because we haven't seen any teams in NBA history that can do what they can do when they go small. So I think Oklahoma City's only option really is hoping those big guys can dominate and then forcing Golden State out of that small lineup. But it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, Alex, I mean, we know Thompson and Curry, and then, of course, you got Green, and then I guess Iguodala and others that you can keep going down the list to. Livingston and Spates can have add some offense for them. Who is the third guy for Oklahoma City you think needs to help them out offensively?
Well, I think typically in the past it was Serge Ibaka because he's able to score in the paint, knock down mid-range shots, and really he's expanded his range at the three-point line. But there were times during this last series where he wasn't playing a whole lot or wasn't being utilized a whole lot. So honestly, it seems strange, but I would say it's Cantor. If you look at this last series, they really gave the ball to Cantor a lot down low, and he had a number of games where he was that third option, and sometimes even a second option when Durant or Westbrook weren't playing well. So it seems strange to say that because for most of the year, he hasn't started, and he isn't that guy that, is a huge star, or a big name like, Golden State's three guys. But I think that Cantor, he has to leave his mark on this series because if he can go down low and, score over Draymond Green and force make adjustments and play either Andrew Bogut or Festus Ezeli, that changes things. We all know that, that small lineup for Golden State just beats everyone. It's called the death lineup for a reason. So I think that's where you really need Cantor to step up, and we know he's capable of it. He's a very good offensive player, can score in the post. So if I'm Oklahoma City, I'm trying to get him involved. And if not him, I think Steven Adams. I think it has to be one of those guys.
Alex Kennedy's with us, basketballinsiders.com here as the NBA conference finals begin tonight with Cleveland and Toronto. Tomorrow night, the Western Conference. Who, in your opinion, would have given Golden State a better series? Is this the best series we got right here, or would you have rather seen San Antonio?
I would have rather seen San Antonio. I just think with the Thunder, as talented as they are, I just think the matchup would have been better if it's San Antonio, just because I think, Popovich, first of all, is an amazing coach, and he finds a way to really do a good job of taking certain players out of games. I think him against Steph Curry would have been very interesting. And I think the season series kind of showed that, Golden State was able to dominate Oklahoma City, whereas, the Spurs competed, and oftentimes they didn't even have their entire lineup against the Warriors. So I think, this series is going to be a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of fun matchups there. And I think if you just talk about from an athleticism and one-on-one standpoint, this one does line up pretty well. But the Spurs are just so hard to bet against in a 7-game series. I think the Oklahoma City matchup was really bad for them because Russell Westbrook was able to just dominate Tony Parker. At this point in his career, Parker couldn't really stay in front of Westbrook. Kawhi Leonard wasn't able to dominate like he did in the first round just because he had Kevin Durant and others on him. And then just because Tim Duncan has gotten a bit older, LaMarcus Aldridge isn't a great defender, that's why Oklahoma City was able to put those big men in there and have them dominate like they did. But I think if you have a Spurs-Warriors matchup, I think, the Spurs can match up a little bit better. So it's unfortunate we didn't get to see that. I think for most of the year, everyone's kind of looking forward to that. But I do think this series is going to be a lot of fun, too.
We're talking with Alex Kennedy about the basketball playoffs. We got the draft lottery tomorrow night. Speaking of the draft lottery, we saw last year's number one pick, Karl Anthony Towns. He was a unanimous choice. Number one, I want to get your take on this year's draft. Is there a player in this year's draft that will have a bigger impact than Towns, in your opinion? Obviously, those two guys, Ingram and Simmons, would be the most logical choices. But will this year's number one pick have a bigger impact than last year's?
I don't think so. I think Towns, he was just phenomenal. He had one of the best rookie campaigns in NBA history. His PER was only behind Michael Jordan, Shaq, Tim Duncan, and David Robinson. So that's a great company to be in, to be number 5 on that list. He was just fantastic. And he was able to do it on both ends, too. Averaging over 18 points, almost 11 rebounds, almost 2 blocks. You just don't see that kind of impact for a rookie typically, especially a guy that was one and done. He just has so much more room to improve. I think he's probably one of the best number one picks we've seen in a very long time. So I think, while I could see Simmons or Ingram being very effective, their game is just different. You look at both players, they do have some weaknesses. And I think there is some doubts that, those guys could be a superstar or a franchise player, whereas Towns, it's very clear that he's going to be, the cornerstone for Minnesota moving forward. It's interesting that Ingram and Simmons are very different. Simmons, you look at his game, great passer, really like a point forward type, can rebound, play defense. He can score the ball finishing at the rim, but his shot just isn't there, and that's something he needs to work on. That's been the biggest knock on him. And in today's NBA, not having a three-point shot or even a mid-range shot can hurt you. And then you look at Ingram, he's a fantastic scorer. So it really depends who gets that first pick. If it's Philadelphia, maybe they do go Ingram because he can score the ball and stretch the floor, and that's something they may need alongside, the other core pieces they have. But it's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I was going to say if the Sixers end up there, it's you wonder is Simmons was he on that level where I don't want to say he's LeBron, but when LeBron was in that draft, it was whoever's number one is taking him, and if you don't, you're making a huge mistake. Did Simmons have so much hype that teams are going to feel pressured into picking him number one?
Well, it's interesting because he had that hype before he, started playing college ball.
Yeah.
When he was younger, everyone kind of talked about Simmons as the guy. It's kind of like Andrew Wiggins. He's been one of those guys that's been on the NBA radar since he was, a young teenager. So he's been that guy that everyone assumed would be a number one pick whenever he entered the draft. But then Brandon Ingram just played so well this year, and I think his the shot concerns of Simmons kind of hurt him a bit. So I honestly think you could take Ingram, and, an NBA team wouldn't get too much flack for doing that, especially if it's a good fit for their lineup. I think if you're a team that doesn't have any shooting and you need that go-to scorer potentially on the perimeter, then Ingram makes a lot of sense. But I do think that, we're going to see some teams value Simmons over Ingram. It just depends on what you have. If you're a team that already has a number of scorers, Simmons is going to be fantastic for you because he's going to be a nightly triple-double threat. He's going to be a facilitator and get your other players involved. So the way I kind of look at it is Ingram could be that, number one option, that star for you if you don't have one. Whereas Simmons, I think he makes all your players better. He makes everyone around him better and, elevates the game of his teammates. It kind of really depends what you have already in place to really make that decision. It's kind of tough. But there's no question those are the top two guys. After that, there's a pretty big drop-off. Bender is the overseas guy that some people love, some people aren't so sure about. Chris Dunn, one of the older players in this draft, very good perimeter defender, but also has issues shooting the ball. Jaylen Brown, he has motor issues and consistency issues. So there's no question those are your top two guys. It just comes down to what a team needs.
The draft lottery tomorrow night, Sixers have the best chance in the NBA history, I guess it was, according to Sam Hinkie's letter, that he's given the best percentages for the first pick, the second pick, the third pick, but the highest probability is that they get the fourth pick and would not get the Lakers pick to convey. It's odd how that all works out, but the percentages are there that they could not get the first pick, and that would be very disappointing, Alex, for them. We know that they have tried and tried and tried. They have not ended up. How big is Tuesday night, particularly for what they have tried to do over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's huge, especially in a draft like this where it's very clear there are two guys and there's a big drop-off. I think they have to get one of those top two picks because, look, their goal throughout this whole process has been trying to find star players and, team up multiple star players through the draft. If they can't do that, if they have to settle for, one of the other guys in this draft, one of the, second-tier guys, then that's a big letdown. I think they've done a pretty good job with their picks so far. You talk about Jahlil Okafor, and I think he could develop into a special player. I think Nerlens Noel, we've seen his potential. There are a number of guys that have really, played well, but they still are looking for that number one guy, I think. Okafor may become that down low, but you need perimeter guys as well, and I think that's really what they're focused on in this draft. The best case scenario is that, they have multiple picks and they can address the perimeter, whether it's shooting guard or small forward, and then, also address the point guard position. And they could do that later in the first round potentially, but I think, they have to hit tomorrow. That's really what it comes down to. If they can hit, then you're talking about this team being one of the best, up-and-coming cores in the NBA. But if they miss, then, there's going to be even more doubts and criticism about this whole plan.
I talked to Brett Brown last week and asked him about free agency, and he said he believes that the Sixers are going to start to become a more attractive option for free agents. Now, I don't think that means Kevin Durant is going to be signing with the Sixers anytime soon. But can you find up and down that free agent list a good fit in this particular offseason for them where they are? A lot of people have mentioned DeRozan because of Colangelo and that attachment there. But is there somebody in this free agent class that you think makes some sense for them to target?
Yeah, I do think they're going to be active in free agency. At the draft combine in Chicago, they were telling some of these prospects that, this next year is when they want to really take a step forward and start winning. So, the fact that we're telling free agents that and really making it clear that, or not free agents, prospects that, and making clear they wanted to win now, that tells me they're going to be active in, the trade market and in free agency. I look at some of the younger guys that are in this free agent class, and those are the guys that target, obviously, as you said, guys like Kevin Durant, Al Horford, guys that are older that are on contending teams right now aren't going to leave their current team to go to the Sixers just because there's just so much work to still be done there. But you mentioned DeMar DeRozan. If they were to give a max contract to DeRozan, that becomes interesting. I'm not sure I'd want DeRozan on a max contract, especially after watching him throughout this postseason kind of disappear at times, being consistent, shoot Toronto out of some games. But, there's no question he's a very talented player, still relatively young. He's an all-star. Other guys, there's a few restricted guys that I would look at. Harrison Barnes, people have thrown his name out there. He may not be able to stay with the Warriors and get a big payday. The Golden State may have to choose, do they keep him just because they've already had to pay Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Steph Curry. He's going to be up for a new contract pretty soon. He's on the best contract in the NBA right now just because he signed right after his ankle injury. Harrison Barnes becomes interesting. And there's other restricted guys, too. Someone like Evan Fournier could be interesting. He's a very good shooter, played really well with this young Orlando Magic team this year. Restricted guys are kind of difficult because their team can match and, your money gets tied up temporarily. But, restricted guys are typically the younger free agents that are out there. If you go for a guy that's a bit older, unrestricted, then typically they're, at that point in their career where they're looking to contend and win. A restricted guy is very young. And I think, you want to grab young guys that can build alongside this core they already have in Philly.
Talking with Alex Kennedy, Basketball Insiders. Real quick, Frank Vogel met with the Knicks last week. I thought it was bizarre they promoted McMillan. That seems to be a little shady or something just doesn't add up there. You hearing anything about where Vogel could end? I mean, is the Knicks his best opportunity right now?
Well, I think the Knicks are somewhat intriguing, but there's no question that Kurt Rambis is still in the mix for that job. And I think I'd be somewhat concerned if I'm Vogel, just because, if they're making Rambis be on his staff or if Phil Jackson is basically running things and Vogel's just a puppet, I'm not sure how attractive that is. It didn't work out for Derek Fisher. And I'm not sure how that Knicks organization is being run right now. The fact that they met with Vogel and they're, that Phil Jackson and their GM, Mills, missed the combine, that's just strange to me. You don't usually see that for a team that's still building. So I have questions about New York. I think Vogel will be their best option. I think he's extremely, talented defensive end, and if they can help him on the offensive end by, improving his coaching there or having him institute some element of the triangle, maybe that does work out for both sides. But if I'm Vogel, I still think I'm staying out that 1 year and waiting for, a contender to open up next year and then go after that job. But, I do understand if he wants to coach right now, it is somewhat attractive to play or to coach with Phil Jackson and have those. And also be in the Eastern Conference still. I wouldn't want to go out west where there's just so many contenders. I understand the attraction, big market, but I'm not sure I would take that job.
You like Orlando for him at all? Young team, or is it just too much of a mess out there?
Well, I'm not sure Orlando's a good fit for him just because they have so many guys that struggle on offense as is. They have a number of good defenders, but if you look at that core they've assembled, they don't really have any shooters and offensive players. So I think, if you take a defensive-minded coach that has struggled to score the ball and struggled on offense, and you team him with, guys that really struggled shooting the ball and scoring the ball, I think that's somewhat of a bad mix. Unless he'd be willing to bring in an offensive coordinator type onto his staff that would really help with that, I'm not sure that's a good fit. Just because guys like Alfred Payton, Aaron Gordon, Victor Oladipo, those guys can't really shoot the ball well, and that's going to be a concern for him. I think, defensively it would make a lot of sense, and he's good at developing young players, so certainly there's worse options for Orlando, but I'm just not sure the personnel fits his style.
Last one for Alex Kennedy, Basketball Insiders, at Alex Kennedy NBA. Saric, what do you feel there? I know a lot of people, he's saying all the right things, they're saying all the right things, but we know monetarily it doesn't make sense for him. What say you?
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you there. I honestly, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but I would agree with you.
All right, we'll keep our eye on that. Obviously, we talked to a lot of people who just will believe it when they see it, and we'll see what Saric ends up doing with the Sixers. We know Embiid, a little bit more active, and some interesting stuff on him is coming out as well. He's Alex Kennedy from BasketballInsiders.com. The NBA playoffs, the Eastern and Western Conference Finals begin this week. Thanks, Alex.
All right, take care. Thank you.